So today, basically, I want to review your writing, okay? You submitted this, the audience submitted it, and I want to compare two very interesting manuscripts, both fantasy, and they both have been sent by the audience. And so chapter 1, a premature discharge. So magic is for real. This one story is actually epi-humans live side by side with us. The magic and tools they possess are powerful, but not limitless. They are still beholden to the laws of nature. So, and this one is a, faded dragon, very similar. Of course, you can tell from this picture, it's gonna be some epic fantasy. Look at this. I simply cannot stop appreciating this one. Look at this. Look at this. I mean, just focus on it. Okay, just take it in. That cover is brilliant, man. Cameron Michaels. All right. So these two stories, I really want to compare them, and the reason why I want to compare them, it has to do with the structure of the story, because they both use very different structures, and I'm gonna make an argument that one is actually better than the other. And so just to show you what I'm talking about, let's go to actually the prologue, right, of Faded Dragon. So such were the words of beginnings. Why they had come to his mind among the swirl of voices was a mystery. Perhaps the beginning of the end reminded him of times long past, like the fragments of a parasite still clinging to its host. Or maybe it was his name. It had been so long since he could utter it, since anyone could. At first, many feared it, but now it was practically forgotten. He only knew himself as the keeper now, and even that was barely true. He tried brushing it all away, focusing on the task at hand. And so you might ask, okay, so what's the structure you're talking about here? Okay, so let's take a look at the first paragraph here. It had been a slow night at the office, and nobody was complaining. Luckily for the vanguard officers on duty, human and epi-human crime statistics follow a similar pattern, and statistically poor weather and low temperatures are reliable deterrents. The vanguard is made up of epi-human police officers that fulfill all the duties and quotas of regular police officers, with the added responsibility of protecting humans from interacting with the epi-human world in ways that are dangerous, illegal, or otherwise undesirable. Okay? So, if you noticed that both of these two paragraphs are exposition heavy, and B, both of these two paragraphs have the character, okay, to a different degree, that is the point, okay? So this story, Magic is for Real, is significantly worse when it comes to actually establishing the character. Cameron Michaels is significantly better, if you can notice. This is how to start a story. You never ever want to start a story in this context, okay? You want to start in the second paragraph. Alfred rested his heavy head on the cushion of his chair. You never want to start this way. Honestly, it's just always hook the audience into the story using humans, okay? Using a character, using a person. Because when you use a human, the reader can immediately gravitate toward the story. There is something innately relatable, right? Alfred. Just speak a name, right? For example, you go outside, okay? Like a maniac. Go up to people and speak. Just say a name, right? And they're going to say, oh, who's that? What are you talking about? Effectively, the best hook I can think of is a name. Why? Because we are always curious about a name, right? So these two stories, you can see that very quickly that we are introduced to the character of the keeper, all right? He knew himself as the keeper now, and even that was barely true. You see, even that was barely true. It indicates that there are complexities to this character. He tried brushing it all away. It means that he's trying to busy himself from these challenging internal difficulties. And so it means that this is the best possible way in my eyes. And I love starting stories this way. Of course, there are times when it's great. It's in fact amazing to start a story with this way, right? For example, it had been a slow night at the office and nobody was complaining. The vanguard officers. Basically, you are focusing on a body of officers or an organization, or you're focusing on something about the world. However, those things are much more difficult to pull off. You know why? Because you honestly have to have something interesting. The police here are very interesting. However, it is not communicated in an interesting way. Perhaps if you're going to start with the police, maybe start with the police in action. Okay, the police actually in action. So you don't want to typically go with this, because the name Alfred alone, just say Alfred, is far superior and far better way of hooking the audience than this entire first paragraph. Because the police, they're not in their best element. They just, it had been a slow night at the office and nobody was complaining. Yeah. So I wouldn't look. I wouldn't start the story that way. To be honest, I don't want to come across as an a-hole, but I would never start the story this way. Luckily for the vanguard, the officers on duty, human and epihuman crime statistics follow a similar pattern, blah, 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 right? So this story, The Faded Dragon by Cameron Michaels, is far superior in establishing the character, in establishing an effective hook. All right, it's way, way better, but it actually keeps going. In other words, this is just a better beginning in overall. So we established right now, the most important thing to do in a beginning is to establish two things: to establish the character and the struggles, the internal struggles of the character. And if you're not going to do that, it's okay. You have to establish a promise, okay? So in other words, because not all stories are heavily character focused. There are plot driven stories, then there are character driven stories. If your story is plot driven, you want to establish the premise. You want to establish the promise as well. So the premise and the promise. And and we can tell that, obviously magic is for real, is a lot more plot driven from what I can tell, just from the first paragraph, than this story, which is a lot more character driven. Okay. And of course, personally, we all have our tastes. Personally, I prefer character driven stories. If you are focusing on the plot here, you should definitely start with something about the plot, which is technically the police, right? The vanguard officers and the epihuman crime that they prevent. Well, I think it would just be superior if you started somewhere with them in action, yeah? And so that way it's a much more, it's a better way to demonstrate the plot-driven nature of the story, what the story is about, which is these epihumans, right? But it actually keeps going. The second paragraph, Alfred rested his heavy head on the cushion of his chair. As a fresh-faced private, his blonde, nearly translucent hair had earned him the nickname Goldilocks, a moniker he had shed since being promoted to lieutenant. However, some Vanguard veterans still called him that out of habit. Alfred joined the Vanguard at age 22, and after 13 years of service, that's a lot, he had never considered a different occupation. The stress and long hours of the job had taken a toll on him, but his youthful appearance remained. His rounded cheeks and clean shave made people miscalculate his age quite often. See, this is still perpetuating the same mistake, okay? It is still perpetuating the same mistake. And what's that mistake? Mostly, you don't have something concrete. This is just information. There is no story happening here. Alfred is resting his heavy head. This is the beginning of the story. This is chapter 1. A premature discharge. I mean, sure, that's a nice title, I suppose. But you see, this is still the same problem perpetuates, the same problem continues. You don't have an actual story. If they were going out there, and of course we can tell the story is plot driven. If they were out there Because how can we tell? Because Alfred was introduced, but no complexities to Alfred have been introduced so far other than basic information. Thus, it means Alfred is mostly a vehicle for the plot to happen, okay? Which is not bad. There are stories that are thriller stories. And this look at the car, you know, you can see in the title, there is a car exploding. So obviously it's a much more of a thriller story. Well, you should start with a thrilling aspect, okay? That would be a lot more concrete. It would establish the story in a lot more precise way. But you see, with Cameron Michaels, the keeper knew he was in, you know, Derium, the old world of the elves, far southward, hidden away in the waters of the righteous. In the dimly lit cave-like prison, he was watching something, though none could see him. He couldn't even see himself, scarcely existing in a spiritual sense. But he was there somehow, and it was time to make the first move. The figure, you see, I want to keep reading. Actually, I just kept reading as a habit because I really want to know more, right? Of course, I finished reading this before. This is not my first reaction. But you see, the point here is this is a lot more concrete. We have an actual concrete story established here. He's somewhere in a cave-like prison. And there's, you know, scarcely existing. And of course, he couldn't even see himself. It's that dark. The figure chained to the wall could hardly move. Okay, so there is an actual concrete story. And this is the second thing you want to do when you start the story, okay? You want to have a concrete story. You want to have a concrete, real thing, okay? You do not want to end up expositing. Okay, this is thin air. Look at this second paragraph. Alfred rested his heavy head on the cushion of his chair. Come on, that is thin air. This is not a concrete story. Across from Alfred, the third paragraph, by the way, the same problem continues until ninth paragraph. I know already. Joe Fowl sat, I don't know if that's how you say the name, sat with his legs propped up on the desk. Beer belly gently, bro, 3 paragraphs and people are just relaxing. I came here for the exploding car in the book cover. Okay, I want to see cars blow up. I want to see the police chase epi-humans, you know. Across from Albert, Joe sat with his legs propped up on the desk, the beer belly gently hanging out over his belt line, while he watched last night's etc. etc. So I hope you can see how this problem, by the way, continues until deep down the story. In other words, when you start the story, here's the conclusion. I don't want to waste your time. If you're character driven, have a character establishment. Also, if you're plot driven, establish that plot, establish that premise. And finally, if your story requires that you want to hook the audience, hook them not with thin air, hook them with a concrete, solid story. Okay? I hope this helped. I hope that also Cameron Michaels and the other author took something from this, and I hope that they can learn from this and improve. I enjoyed definitely reading all of these. This is I'm going to give you that summary. I genuinely don't want you to go through the whole thing, right? Yeah. So I hope that you enjoy this. Have a nice day. Bye.